Welcome to A Day in the Life. This is Jim James. I'm a part-time professional poker player. I primarily play online cash games, and I've been doing that for about the past 3 or 4 years. Been playing poker since 2007. Started with sit and goes, then went to tournaments. Eventually started playing cash games, and then settled in on pretty much nothing but cash games back in about 2000, late 2010, mid 2010, somewhere in that range. I specialize in 30 big blind short stack play, and recently published a book on the subject called Automatic Poker. If you want to learn more about that book, you can go to my website, automaticpoker.com. I enjoy teaching others how to get better at poker, which was pretty much the entire reason I wrote the book. And I believe that playing a short stack is the fastest way for someone to learn the game of poker and become well versed in the fundamentals at the same time, which are essential for winning money at the game. The purpose of this video series is to go through sessions that I've played hand by hand and discuss both specific and general strategy. I'll include hands from the session that I put money into the pot, VPIP'd, but not all the hands that I played. I left out a lot of the redundant standard ones. I left a few of those in, but took out a lot of them that are pretty obvious. I want to still give you a taste of I wanted to give you a taste of what a typical session looks like for me. So I'm basically just starting from beginning to end. The first hand I played all the way to the last one. I think this session was 2.5 hours. Played a total of like 700 hands, and I think this series will cover about 90 hands. So it's going to take a few parts. The goals of the series are to demonstrate how effective and profitable playing a short stack is, to dissect so-called tough situations which will possibly offer insights into dealing with similar spots you may be encountering in your own play. And lastly, I made this video to help dispel some myths about short stacking. The biggest one being that the great majority of people think that, especially the people that view short stacking in a derogatory sense, think that short stacking is all about pre-flop play, 3-bet shoving, and pretty much nothing else. I want you to pay close. I can't talk today. Sorry about that. I want you to pay close attention to this video in the sense that you'll realize that almost all of the hands played in the session do not involve pre-flop shoving. I think I 3-bet about 9 times in the session of 90 hands. The 90 hands I'm showing anyways. My overall long-term 3-bet percentage is like 6%, which is pretty far from what you call maniac status. Of course, re-stealing, it's going to be quite a bit higher, and versus early positions, something like, I don't know, 4, 5, 6%. Just depends on the player I'm up against. So without further delay, I'm going to go and get started. I'll try to keep each of these videos to about 30 minutes. Of course, I may get into it and decide that's just not enough, but that's the plan right now. I'm not sure how many parts it's going to take to get through all 90. Whatever it takes, it takes. And just once again, keep in mind that some of the hands will be trivial and others will be fairly complicated, so don't be surprised if I spend 5 minutes on one hand and then like 30 seconds on the next. I'm just going to go through the sessions in the order they're played. The session that I'm showing you, I played on September 20th, 2013, and it includes a mix of hands from 100 NL and 200 NL. So the first hand I picked up was Ace-King offsuit in the big blind. I mean, this is not that interesting of a hand. The small blind raises me, and he's only got like 18 big blinds, so really no point in 3-betting small, so I just jam it in, and he does call me. So this is a pretty standard cooler hand because he had jacks and it's versus Ace-King, so 2 monsters in the blinds. Not much either of us could do there. So the next hand I played was 7-6 offsuit in the small blind. This is a standard limp with a connected hand, and since we have a guy that limped under the gun, he's a potential weak player, recreational player, or fish. So I definitely want to play pots against this guy, so that's another good reason to limp in the small blind. Big blind checks, and we see a ace-jack-6 flop. I flop bottom pair, so this is a good spot to lead, especially on an ace-high board. Big blind almost never has an ace. The under the gun player doesn't always have to have an ace either. He'll have one probably, I don't know, 30% or something of the time. So just betting half pot here. If I'm, I could be betting for value, but I'm also betting because I could make a jack fold by the turn, and obviously I'll find out if he has an ace pretty quick. So the plan is to pretty much bet the flop, bet the turn, and then just evaluate the river. So I barrel to get value from draws and sometimes get the villain to fold the jack, but he calls in this case. The river is a pretty bad card to bet because it looks like we have an ace or a jack. So I think this is an obvious check fold. I would expect the villain to check back with all of his hands, except for maybe his jacks or his aces, which will probably bet, which are beating excuse me, which are beating me. It is less likely. I just think it's less likely that he'll bluff a missed flush draw because the board paired, and he'll be scared that I have a jack. So I just go ahead and check, and he does bet half pot, and I check calling the river is an option sometimes in this scenario, but since the jack came on the river, it makes me lean, for reasons I already stated, towards a fold. If it was something like a, I don't know, something like a 4, offsuit 4, I would probably consider a check calling at some players, but my read, I think I had a read on this guy, is just a passive, fishy player. And while those players do still bluff when they miss their draws sometimes, because, you know, people watch the World Poker Tour, and you can't win with air without betting, right? So, yeah, so I expect to be beat here a fair amount of the time. Sometimes we'll get on, but I'm just pretty sure we're going to beat most of the time. And I think looking at the hand histories, the villain did have ace-10. Oh, that's something I should mention, is a lot of the times, well, almost all the time, I'll know all the hands that everybody's playing, because since Bovada is an anonymous site, the day after you play a session, you can download the hands, and they do reveal everybody's whole cards, and I just know that's because they're trying to, it's just so they can catch people colluding. It's for transparentness, I guess, since there has been a lot of people talking about how it's exploitable to be able to cheat on Bovada because it's of the anonymity. So I'm guessing that's, and I didn't really know were doing that until earlier this month, and they weren't doing it 2 or 3 months ago, because I looked through my database, but it looks like they started maybe a month and a half ago, showing all the hands, which is awesome for reviewing sessions, because then you can see exactly what everybody had at every spot. So it's actually a pretty cool feature. So yeah, he did have ace-10. I'm looking at my notes. So I made a pretty good fold. Considering that, I mean, I could have considered representing the jack, but you're just not going to get a fish off of an ace. Next hand I had 10-7 suited, and I do open the button and get 3-bet by the small blind. There's plenty of hands in my range that I can play back with against a loose three better if I have a read on him as that. Um, but readless, I just don't do much light four betting, and somebody has to be pretty much. I can, I just have to think that somebody's just auto three betting me before I'll four bet light a hand like this. And this is one of the things I've looked at, knowing what everybody's hole cards are. And it's pretty awesome. I've looked through like 40,000 hands I've played. Well, I filtered for times I got three bet, and people are only three betting light like 15% of the time or something. Not even that. And a lot of times they're three betting light. I'm not even sure they're three betting light. It's like with ace four or something like that, and they may be looking to stack off with that hand against like a button open. So you're not getting three bet light as much as you might think you are. Even though if it happens like 3 or 4 times during a session in a row, it might seem that way. But I don't think people are three betting you light often enough to make it where you're getting exploited. So it's not really something to be hugely concerned with in a general sense. At least not on this side. Next hand I have ace 10 offsuit, which is a standard raise under the gun for me, and there is a poster, it looks like, cutoff. It is always nice to have that extra dead money. I could consider making this 3x because of that, but it's fine. And I flop top pair. This is almost certainly the best hand. I have the ace of diamonds, so I'm not too concerned about a diamond peeling off. So this is actually a good spot where I like to pot control the street and keep more of my opponent's ranges in the hand. So I think checking here is a good option than going for maybe 1 or 2 streets on the turn and river. I mean, there is a chance we get action from weak aces, and I could be missing some value that I could barrel off and got him to call. But most of the time, you're not going to get action except for from, sets, big flush draws, things like that. And although I don't really mind getting in against a flush draw on this board, it's high variance. I'd actually just prefer to get a safe 2 streets most of the time. And the times that I'm missing value from getting 3 streets of value from a weak ace is more than made up from the times that I keep 8x hands in the pot for an extra street, or maybe the turn's a queen or a jack or something, and I get value from king jack or something. So it balances it out and mitigates my variance, which is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's definitely something you should consider. And plan on making a video on this subject, so I won't go into too great detail and depth on the subject right now. So I do check, and it checks through. The turn's a jack of hearts, and the big blind leads into me. This is either a weak ace, a jack X hand, could be 9-10, flush draw, and truthfully could just be complete air. This is a good spot. I could possibly raise this, but I'm then shutting out the cutoffs range, and basically if he doesn't have a monster, he can't call a raise. So I'm pretty sure I'm going to be good by the river almost always. I'm not really, I mean, there could be diamond draws, but I can reevaluate that on the river. I'm not really concerned about calling one more bet if a flush comes in, but I don't want to raise, get called, flush comes, and then I'm playing for stacks. So he's betting for me. I'm getting my street of value by calling. So it's potential I can get another street on the river if it checks to me or if he bets. So with a 2 street plan for value, I'm still on track for that, so I think calling here is good. The cutoff does fold and the river pairs 3s. Now I'm splitting with every other ace, so it's not the greatest river in the world. For some reason he had 3-4 or something. I'm now behind. But I think he might bet his missed flush draws and his jacks too. But I don't see a point in raising. I don't think I'm getting him off with any kind of ace at this point. So really I'm just turning my hand to a bluff once he bets. So I think just calling is best here. So I think he ended up having something like ace-4. Maybe I missed some value from Jack X that I could have min raised and got a call from. But yeah, so it does show that he had ace-4. Yeah, I think I've pretty well explained this hand. I got my 2 streets of value. I'm sure if I had known his exact holding, I would have been playing this a little bit different. But it ends up being a split pot anyways. It's not really that interesting. But just, I guess the lesson from this hand is you don't always want to just fire when you hit top pair. Of course you don't always want to check it either, but especially on an anonymous site like this, I don't need to worry too much about balance. I just need to worry about kind of balance in the sense of making the most money across entire ranges. And on ace-high boards, you're just not going to get that much value from worse, because everybody thinks that the pre-flop raiser has an ace and will fold just about everything that they have that doesn't connect strongly with the board. So a lot of times when it's an ace-high board and you have like ace-jack, ace-10, and you get action raised, you're going to be up against a big hand, a monster. So, and you're just folding out everything that you beat and getting raised by everything that's beating you. So it's kind of one of those situations where you think you're value betting, but really all you're doing is value timing yourself and getting rid of every part of the opponent's range you don't want to get rid of. So yeah, let's just go ahead and move on to the next hand. Have ace-king offsuit. Under the gun. As you see, I limp. This is something I do frequently with ace-king in at least the first 2 positions. Sometimes on some tables I'll just limp all the way through the button. Yeah, I'll go ahead and play through the hand. We can talk about the merits of limping either another time or later in this hand. I get ISO'd by the button, which is awesome. And I just go ahead and limp shove my ace-king. And he folds. So I pick up the dead money from his raise. Yeah, let me go back to this hand. The merits of limping ace-king, I'll just briefly go through it, are that if it checks through and it's a multi-way pot, you have a disguised strong hand. It's going to make the best hand on flop a lot. You're going to be up against a lot of weak aces that limp behind you, weak kings. And if it's a flop that's basically sucks for your hand, you've only invested a min bet versus, well, let me qualify that, because if I raise ace-king under the gun on Bovada, I'm usually going to get at least 1 caller, which is fine. I don't mind getting 1, but a good percentage of the time I'm getting a 3-way, 4-way pot, even at 1-2. So here I am ace-king, out of position, 3 or 4-way, and the flop is 10-jack 2 or something to that effect. I have a strong hand, but I'm in a 4-way pot, and it's just more difficult to play. So I like to simplify things and give somebody else a chance to raise ISO, because people do tend to ISO wide against the limper, especially since they probably only played like 4 hands with it. They don't know what a limp means. They just see people limping all the time, and they just auto ISO a limper with like 10-9 or something, or ace-5 or ace-10. And I found that when I limp shove, people get stubborn with something like ace-jack. And even though they're beating nothing in a limp shoving range, my limp shoving range, they sometimes just, maybe they've seen it be a spaz in the past from other players with like pocket 3s or 8-9 suited or something crazy. So they think they might be ahead of parts of my range, so I guess that justifies their call. Or they just feel stupid that they've put 4 or 5 big blinds in a pot against a short stack and now they've got to fold, so they go ahead and call, thinking they're priced in or something. I'm not really sure the reasons. What I'm just saying is when I raise, get 3-bet, it's almost always going in, but when I raise and get ISO'd and I go all in, there's a much wider range that's going to be all in with me in that instance, which is awesome. And when I do limp re-raise, I'm guaranteed to see all 5 cards, which is really what you want with Ace King in an all-in situation. And it also gives you the opportunity to have a lot more dead money. I limp, this guy limps, this guy limps, this guy ISOs. I've got an extra 2 big blinds in the pot, which may not sound like that much, but it makes up for the time. It makes up for the fact that Ace King is probably more profitable to raise than it is to limp. And the reason it's more profitable to limp on a site like this on loose tables is just because you have no fold equity pre-flop with an unmade hand, and you're gonna get cooler in those situations. You'll raise Ace King, the flop will be King 3 deuce, and you'll be up against 3s or deuces, and there's obviously nothing you can do about it. But if you had limp re-raised, you would have made them fold those deuces or 3s and taken their dead money, which is a pretty powerful thing. So I looked through my entire database. I don't want to belabor this point too much. I just like to qualify the reason I'm actually limping Ace King. I went through my entire database, and I used to raise Ace King all the time as a short stacker, but I have a significant sample size doing both limping and raising, and I found that my win rate doing either is basically the same. So if I have the same win rate either limping or raising, then why not choose the method that it just simplifies things? It's much easier to play an Ace King hand after limping than it is to raise it and play a raised pot multi-way. It just simplifies everything. You know what flops you can continue on. You have disguised hand, you get value from worse hands when it limps through and checks through. And the times you get ISO'd, the money's all in and you have nothing else to think about. So yeah, consider if you're playing a short stack limping Ace King. Unless you're on an extremely tight table, then I would advise raising it probably. Next hand is Ace Jack offsuit on the button. And I get flatted by the big blind after raising. I have top pair, good kicker, and I decided to check behind. It's a dry board, not going to connect with many ranges. There's not going to be much in his range that's going to continue on this board. So the check is for deception, similar to the other ace hand I had. And also I give him a chance to stab the turn with all of his air. Because a lot of times when I check back here, it looks like maybe I have a 10, a 9s, 8s, 7s, 6s, something with showdown value that can't stand much heat, and maybe people think they can bluff me off with 2 streets or something like that. So if he's sitting there with something like King Queen, he might fire the turn, fire the river, hoping to get me off a 10 or a small pair. So that's my reasoning for checking behind with the ace. I turn 2 pair, which is good for my hand. The hand's also very good for his range. So a raise could be considered here, but still most of his range is air, or a jack, single jack hand that might fold to my raise. The only thing really I would be getting in with me here is like Jack 10 or King Queen, and one of those hands is beating me. It's conceivable he could have something like Ace 10 or something, but it's just not that likely. So I think calling here is best to keep the air in his range in the hand, so it can maybe barrel the river. So I'm pretty much calling here and then calling most rivers or raising some rivers. I'm almost never folding a river. Even if a king or queen pulls off, I'm probably calling the river. Because it just looks like such a good card for him to barrel with. And so I get my first street of value. The river's a very good card. And when he checks, I know I can just value bet. And it looks like he did have air because he just folds. And see if I can show what he had. Yeah, he actually turned a straight. So he had some equity in the pot, so maybe he just bet the turn because he picked up some equity. Regardless, even if he makes a straight, he's not getting a huge amount of value from me. So it's a shame that he didn't go ahead and fire the river as a bluff as well, which I expect him to do with that kind of hand a lot of times when a 4 peels off. Maybe a stronger player would still go ahead and bet the river, but yeah. Next hand, I have 10-6 suited in the small blind. It folds to me and I open min raise. Just want to talk about the small blind for a bit. In a vacuum, you can pretty much open 100% from the small blind with no reads, because the fold equity of your hand pre-flop and combined with the actually makes the strength of your hand pretty much irrelevant. Although I do sometimes throw away complete junk, something like 9 deuce offsuit. I pretty much the plan is just to raise unless I have a read that my opponent is a calling station or a really aggressive 3-better. In those cases, I will tighten up quite a bit. Well, when I say quite a bit, I might tighten up to like 50% of hands. Otherwise, you really can't go wrong just by raising the small blind. And not to get too much into theory in this video, but when you think about the fold equity, if people fold 30% of the time when I'm min raising, I'm basically getting half of the money back that I'm investing automatically, because at 57% folds, I'm breaking even. So at half of that, I'm getting half my money back. So I'm raising, basically my blind is invested, so there's $1.50 in the pot. So I'm raising $2 to win $1.50, and that's where the 57%. So I'm basically getting 75 cents back every time I raise. So I'm raising an extra $1. So really every time that I raise here the extra $1, I'm really raising half of what I'm raising, or something like 25 cents. And if this hasn't sank in, if you don't understand the fold equity, this is something you need to look at. And this is why being the aggressor and raising is so powerful in the limit hold'em. It's because the fold equity that you have, the times they fold, makes up for the times that you get 3-bet and have to fold, or make a weak hand on the flop and have to give up. It's not as bad as you think it is. When I raise here and get 3-bet and have to fold, I'm not losing, well, I'm definitely not losing $2 because my $1 was already invested. So you don't ever include your blind as part of your stack. Once it's in the pot, it's in the pot. So I'm basically raising $1 to win $1.50 here, if you want to think of it that way. So if I'm getting 3-bet here, I'm only losing $1. So I'm investing $1 to win $1.50, and I'm losing $1 when I get 3-bet. So it's really not as bad as you think it is. And then when you take the fold equity that you're winning, the times they fold, you're almost free rolling when you min raise somebody in the small blind. That's my point here, is you're probably not opening enough hands in the small blind. If you wanted to stay away from the complete junk, and you want to give opening a wide range in the small blind a try, I recommend opening anything suited, pretty much anything connected, all the way down to 3 deuce offsuit. It's going to be profitable to play. And if you do that 3 or 4 orbits in a row, you're going to build an image. And actually, if you're playing on a site that allows people to track hands on you, you're going to have something like an 80% opening range or better. And that's just going to get you a ton of action when you actually pick up a decent hand. I'm not going to go into the dynamic of adjusting to regulars and people that are light 3-betting, floating, you know, that type of thing. But it's definitely a dynamic that if you work hard at it and you get really good at it, this is a huge source of profit, the small blind right here. So I definitely, if you want to improve your win rate, one of the places you can do it is to get much better at blind versus blind play, both in the big blind and in the small blind. And when you think about it, you free roll every other position, right? You never have to ante unless you're on the ante table from all the other four positions. The only place you're ever forced to invest money is in the blinds. So if you can protect your blinds or win back a portion of blinds, and technically, in theory, if the guy that wins the most blinds is the guy that wins at Hold'em, right? Because everybody's picking up ace-ace versus king-king the same amount of time, and vice versa. Everybody's going to flop the same amount of sets. So when it all comes down to it, it's a fight for the blinds. No matter what anybody else says, Hold'em is a fight for the blinds. So if you get really good at fighting for the blinds, you're going to win money at Hold'em. And that's something I've worked hard on. It's something I've excelled at. My win rate in the small blind, I would put up against pretty much anybody. But I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours working on it. So yeah, I'll get into a lot of these spots, and you'll get some insights into how to play the small and big blind just from watching these videos. So anyways, that was kind of a long-winded version of why I'm playing 10-6 suited here, which some people might throw away. You definitely shouldn't be, because 10-6 suited is a monster in small blind when it folds to you. So I open and he calls. Actually, what happened here? Did he fold? Wow, he folds. Okay, that's unusual. I mean, usually about 70% of the time I'm getting called, so I didn't expect that. But I guess the whole point of reason I showed that hand was just to discuss the merits of and what type of ranges you should be looking to open in the small blind. So I think I've only reviewed about 8 hands, so let me just try to get through a couple more. I'm already 30 minutes into the video. Maybe we can shoot for 40 minutes or something. I feel like I wanted to cover a little bit more. So let's look at these pocket threes. I limp in the threes. It's a little weak to shove because his range here to limp, most limpy players, it's going to be something like a weak ace, king queen, king jack, queen 10 suited, pocket deuces, threes, fours, fives, sixes, sevens, eights. And the portions of the range that are going to call my shove here either are racing with me or have me dominated. And people don't like to limp sixes and fold to a short stack shove, so I'm kind of value timing myself here when I shove, and I just don't have the kind of fold equity I need with this hand. I'd rather have something like jack 10 suited to shove here than, even though I wouldn't do that either, rather than threes. If I had something like 15 big blinds, this would be a fine shove, but with 30 big blinds, it's a good place to limp. And it checks. I think I ran good in this session. It's not the reason I'm highlighting it, but I just happened to run good in this session. I flopped set. So I lead out and get raised. I mean, obviously, I'm never checking here. There's 2 other ranges in the pot on a board that connects with a lot of different ranges, so there's really no point in checking. Well, all I do when I check here is give a free card to a pair that can make a set, or something like a gut shot that's sitting out there. So I don't want to give any free cards. And amazingly, I get raised by the big blind. Normally, when you lead out small blind, if you get raised, it's by a monster. So I fully expected him to have a super strong range here. I thought there was maybe a chance he had a queen, like queen jack or something, but I fully expected him to have like 10 queen, queen 3, 10 3, something like that. But I go ahead and ship it in because when somebody has a super strong received range, there's no point slow playing a monster because they're more than likely going to get it in with you anyways. If he's semi-bluffing jack 9, which is highly unlikely, he may get it in anyways, so there's no point in slow playing. So I go ahead and ship it, and he calls. This is always a good situation. make a boat on the river, and he had second pair, which is another reason you don't want to slow play a big hand on this site, because fish will pay you off with second pair on the flop. I was really surprised that he showed up with that, but not surprised by too much anymore on Bovada. This is the kind of thing that happens. This is why this site is so profitable. He just basically writes me a check for $60 there for no reason. I have Ace King. Yeah, I should have talked about this before I showed you what happened. I only have 15 big blinds here, and if this was a really tight table, I might raise, but I could limp if it was really aggressive. I mean, but actually, there's 10% of my stack in the blinds right here, so that means a lot. Anytime you increase your stack 10%, it's never a bad thing. So a lot of times when I have a hand like Ace King, Jacks, 10s, 9s, 8s, I'll just open shove for 15 big blinds. For one thing, it looks like I'm on tilt for whatever reason, and you might get looked up a lot lighter because of that. It just looks fishy. People will call you all kinds of crazy stuff when you open shove for only 15 big blinds, just because they're trying to actually, I don't know the exact reason, but I'm guessing they're just trying to get me out of the game. People have a tournament mentality maybe to knock me out. So yeah, and turns out that he had Queen Jack, which is a beautiful thing. That is like a 60-40 or so, or better pre-flop. Of course, he did hit trip queens, which is unfortunate, but you know, it's never a bad thing to get all in with against a hand that I just I'm a big favorite against. So I'm just going to cover one more hand. This will be the 10th hand. This will be a good spot to stop. I hope to get more than 10 hands in per video, so this is going to be like a 9-part series if I don't. Well, whatever, it's fine. I feel there's a lot of value in going over these hands as I play them in an actual session, so yeah. I'm going to raise Ace-Jack offsuit and 1-2, no limit. And you'll notice I have $102 here. So I had won a big pot at some point, so I have something like 50 big blinds. So I'm probably looking to get off the table on the next hand because I'm not playing a short stack strategy here anymore. I'm on a mid stack strategy, but Ace-Jack suited is way too strong not to raise. I get flatted by the small blind and big blind and see a three-way flop. It's a very good flop for my hand. However, this is one of those spots that I've been experimenting with alternative lines. The obvious play is to bomb the flop and just try to get it in, which is fine. But the times you're getting in, it's going to be against a king. Basically, against most hands that are willing to get it in, I'm going to be flipping against. And what's the point of just flipping with 50 big blinds? I think checking here is a viable option because if I actually make a flush after checking this flop, no one will ever think I have a flush, if that makes sense. And they're willing to pay off, maybe put more money in than they would have otherwise. So I'm basically setting up value for later streets, and another point is I can safely call a lead on the turn and make sure I realize my entire equity. And another point is I'm three-way. You don't have as much fold equity, and even though I have a strong hand, I don't have a made hand yet. So the fact that I don't have fold equity on the flop is just going to bloat the pot. Bloating the pot is fine because I don't mind it because I'd like to make a flush. But I don't want to get min raised or something on the flop and have this giant pot on the turn, then this, and then get potted into or something and have to fold. That would be a huge error to allow that to happen. And the hands that are going to do that with me anyways are probably going to do that again on the turn because they'll never think I can have a flush draw for reasons I've already stated. So in that case, I think checking here is a good option. So I actually do that. Now, if I had something like 20 big blinds, I would be betting, a portion of my stack and then shoving any turn. But this is alternative lines with like at least 35, 40 big blinds is what I'm talking about. It's kind of a mid-stack strategy mentality, which is fine. I do turn a good card. I mean, of course, the flush is always a good card. But it's not a card that's going to, if somebody had 9x, King X, they're not going to be too scared of that card. Whereas if it was I don't know, if I hit ace instead of a heart, that's a much worse card for me. Now the small blind leads for $12, which he could have anything here. He could have a king, a 9, or it could just be looking to pick up dead money. But when the big blind flats here, I think that he's got something. He's got something good. Some kind of draw, a king, maybe a pair of 8s, a pair of 10s even, which is unlikely. He probably would have 3-bet that pre-flop. I go ahead and make a small raise. I'm trying to set up a good price for my river shove, because I'm going to shove any river here. So I'm trying to set up a good price for a 1-pair hand to call me, because I'm laying like almost 4-1 here on a call. So if somebody's got something like king, queen, it's going to be hard for them to fold getting like 4-1. And then I can put them to a test with their 1-pair hand on the river. This is never a place just to call, because I don't want a heart to roll off. I don't want... there's a number of hands I don't want to roll off here. There's a 1-pair hand that's probably willing to put more money in the pot right now. I'm going to give them the chance to do that. And I do get flatted by the small blind, which is... I actually expect the small blind, if anybody, to be more likely to fold and the big blind to call, but actually the opposite happens, which I don't really care. I'm just glad somebody called. As you see, I left myself just under a pot-sized bet. The villain checks and I do jam. Now he tanks here for... I give him credit for tanking. If I remember correctly, he tanked for like a minute, or however long he's allowed to on Bovada. It seemed like a long time before he actually called, and I would have tanked as long if I were him. And he turns out he had pocket 7s. He turned his set. So I don't blame him for going broke here. And I actually give him credit for actually considering a fold there. So I won one of my biggest pots at 200 no limit that I've won. And that's always nice. So I'm glad the board didn't pair on the river. That would have really sucked. Because $228 on my bankroll is like 7% of my bankroll right now. Something like that, 6%, because my bankroll is like 3,900 or something. I don't know what it was on the 20th. It was probably like 3,500 or 3,600 on Bovada. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Leave a comment, subscribe if you want to see the entire series. I'll try to do a video every few days. Just depends on my mood. I might do it tomorrow. It might be a week. I'm not really doing a set schedule. I'm way too busy to try and do that. It's just whenever I have time and the patience to do it, I'll go ahead and do that. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave a comment or email me at jim@automaticpoker.com. And I hope you enjoy this series. I'm actually enjoying making this one, so that's always good. And I love helping people. I like to talk about hands. So if you have any questions, you can join the forum, post hands, questions, comments, whatever, and you will get answered. There's several active members now, and I do check the boards a few times a day, and I post there. So I look forward to hearing from you there. Once again, go to automaticpoker.com. You can pick up my book and find out more information on it if you're interested in learning the style of play. And yeah, with that, I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Thanks again for watching. Everybody have a good day.